The silent auction, the auction hall, on Cygnus Station, hummed with quiet conversations as Tessa Valoran adjusted the formal diplomatic attire that felt increasingly like a disguise. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe style that matched her expression, neutral, unreadable, perfect for a place where emotions could reveal too much. The clientele consisted mostly of wealthy merchants, corrupt officials, and the occasional mercenary captain looking to acquire specialty items that couldn't be found through legitimate channels. Tessa's presence had raised a few eyebrows, but her diplomatic credentials from Earth provided just enough cover for her attendance. "Next item," announced the auctioneer. A reptilian Draxian with scales that shimmered under the hall's dim lighting. A rare acquisition from the Solarian Empire. Two guards dragged forward a figure wrapped in luminescent chains. When they removed the hood, gasps rippled through the crowd. Standing before them was a female with skin the color of twilight sky, adorned with constellations that seemed to shift across her flesh. Her eyes, brilliant silver, flashed with defiance despite her captivity. Princess Novara of the Solarian royal line, the auctioneer continued, captured during the recent political adjustment in their sector. Trained in imperial protocol, fluent in 12 galactic languages, and possessing unique genetic traits valuable to collectors or research facilities. Tessa's stomach turned. The political adjustment was nothing but a bloody coup that had destabilized an entire sector. And now they were selling royalty like exotic pets. Opening bid starts at 50,000 credits. The room remained eerily silent. Not from moral objection, Tessa realized, but from fear. The Solarian Empire, though weakened, still had enough power to make examples of those who mistreated their royalty. Novara stood straighter, her chin raised despite the humiliation. Something in her posture reminded Tessa of herself years ago, standing alone against impossible odds. 50,000, Tessa called, her voice cutting through the silence. The auctioneer's head snapped toward her, eyes narrowing. The human diplomat bids. How, unexpected. 60,000, came a voice from the Baka. Centaurian merchant, with a reputation for selling exotic companions to wealthy clients. Tessa's jaw tightened. 100,000. The room stilled. Even the auctioneer seemed surprised. 100,000 from the human diplomat, he repeated. Any further bids? The Centaurian merchant looked like he might counter, then thought better of it. Sold to the representative from Earth. Novara's silver eyes locked with Tessa's. Her expression, a complex mixture of fear, anger, and the faintest spark of hope. As the guards led the princess toward her new owner, Tessa stepped forward. "I'll take custody immediately," she said firmly, her diplomatic authority providing just enough weight to her words. Of course, the auctioneer replied with a thin smile. After payment confirmation, Tessa transferred the credits, nearly her entire savings, and then some, knowing this wasn't about money. It was about what happened next when Novara was brought to her side. Still bound in those glowing chains, Tessa leaned close, whispering words only the princess could hear. "I'm not your owner. I'm your way out. Can you walk?" For the first time, genuine emotion crossed Novara's face, caution mingled with desperate hope. "Yes," she whispered back, her voice melodic even in its restraint. "I can run if necessary," good Tessa replied, "because we might need to." Escape from Cygnus Station alarms blared through the station's corridors before. Tessa and Novara had made it halfway to the docking bay. The princess moved with surprising agility despite her restraints, which Tessa had loosened but couldn't fully remove without specialized tools. "They've realized your intent," Novara said, her silver eyes scanning the corridor. The payment cleared, but someone must have questioned why a human diplomat would purchase alien royalty. "Probably the Centaurian," Tessa muttered, pulling Novara into a maintenance shaft as security drones whirred past. "He's likely furious I outbid him." The close quarters of the shaft brought them face to face. Novara's constellations pulsing with what Tessa now recognized as anxiety. The princess's breath came in short gasps, each exhalation carrying a faint scent like cinnamon and ozone. "Why did you do this?" Novara asked. "You've risked everything for someone you don't know." Tessa worked at the princess's restraints with a multi-tool from her belt, because no one else would. And I've seen enough people stand by while others suffer. The final restraint fell away, and Novara rubbed her wrists, the constellations on her skin brightening slightly. The Solarian Empire has little influence with humans. You gain nothing politically from this. Not everything is about political gain, Tessa replied, checking her handheld scanner. Docking Bay 17 is 2 levels down. My ship is small, but fast. They moved through the station's maintenance network, avoiding the main corridors where security would be heaviest. Twice they nearly ran into patrol units, pressing themselves into darkened alcoves. Bodies close, breath held. During one such moment, Novara's hand found Tessa's in the darkness, squeezing slightly. The gesture was simple but loaded with meaning, gratitude, fear, a tentative trust forming between them. When they reached the docking bay, Tessa's heart sank. For armed guards stood before her ship, the smallest vessel in the Bea diplomatic courier, modified for longer journeys. We can't fight through them, Tessa whispered. Pulling back into the shadows, Novara's expression changed, determination replacing fear. We don't have to. My people can manipulate energy fields. It's why the restraints were designed to disrupt our abilities. You can do something about those guards? Not directly, the princess said. But perhaps. She closed her eyes, the constellations across her skin brightening to an almost painful intensity. Suddenly, the lighting panels throughout the docking bay surged, then exploded in a shower of sparks, plunging the area into darkness. Now, Novara hissed. They ran through the confusion, past the disoriented guards. Tessa slapped her palm against the ship's entry panel, and the hatch slid open with agonizing slowness. Halt. A guard's voice rang out, followed by the distinctive whine of a charged pistol. Tessa shoved Novara through the opening, feeling something hot graze her shoulder. Pain flared, but adrenaline kept her moving. She tumbled inside after the princess, slamming her hand on the interior panel to close the hatch. Get in the crash couch, Tessa ordered, diving for the pilot's seat despite her injured shoulder. Her fingers flew over the controls, bypassing the station's automated departure protocols. The ship lurched as magnetic clamps tried to hold it in place, but Tessa had expected this. She triggered the emergency release feature intended for evacuations. It would likely cost her diplomatic credentials when this was over. The small vessel shot from the docking bay, alarms wailing behind them as Cygnus Station receded into the distance. We made it, Novara breathed, her voice a mixture of disbelief and exhilaration. Tessa grimaced, finally acknowledging her wound. For now. But they'll send pursuit ships. We're not safe yet. Sanctuary among stars. Tessa's ship, the Wayfarer, drifted silently through an asteroid field on minimal power. 3 days had passed since their escape from Cygnus Station, and the pursuit ships had finally given up the search in this treacherous region of space. In the ship's small medical bay, Novara gently applied regenerative gel to Tessa's shoulder wound. Her touch was delicate, her constellations glowing softly in the dim light. The tissue is healing well, the princess observed. You were fortunate the beam only grazed you. Tessa winced slightly. Doesn't feel like good fortune at the moment. It's compared to being sold to the highest bidder. A minor injury seems quite fortunate, Novara replied with unexpected lightness in her tone. Their eyes met, and something passed between them, a shared moment of understanding that transcended their different species and backgrounds. Tessa found herself noticing details about the princess, how the tiny stars across. Her skin seemed to pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat, how her silver eyes contained flecks of blue when viewed up close. Your people, Tessa said, breaking the silence. The constellations on your skin are they just decorative, or do they serve a purpose? Novara's expression softened. They're both. They connect us to our ancestral energy and help us channel abilities like the one I used in the docking bay. She hesitated. May I show you something? When Tessa nodded, Novara gently took her hand. The constellations on the princess's arm seemed to flow like liquid light, extending tendrils that briefly touched Tessa's skin. A sensation of warmth spread up her arm, accompanied by a feeling of profound connection. Incredible, Tessa whispered. It's called the joining of paths, Novara explained, her voice intimate in the small space. It's how my people share experiences and emotions. I wanted you to feel my gratitude. The moment was interrupted by the ship's proximity alert. Tessa reluctantly pulled away, moving to the cockpit with Novara close behind. Imperial patrol vessel, Tessa announced, reading the scanner. Heavy class, likely scanning for us. Novara's face tightened with fear. If they find us, ... They won't, Tessa assured her. Powering down even more systems, until the ship was barely more than a floating metal shell. We'll drift with the asteroids until they pass. They sat in near-total darkness. It's the only illumination coming from essential monitoring systems and Novara's faintly glowing skin. The princess had drawn her knees to her chest, her regal bearing giving way to genuine vulnerability. If I'm captured, she said quietly, they'll execute me as a traitor. The usurper who took my father's throne can't risk leaving any legitimate heirs alive. Tessa reached across the space between them, taking Novara's hand. I won't let that happen. The patrol ship drew closer, its scanning beams sweeping through the asteroid field. In the tense silence, Tessa became acutely aware of Novara's proximity, the subtle scent that reminded her of distant stars and unfamiliar worlds. We need to go completely dark, Tessa whispered. Even your bioluminescence might register on their sensors. Novara nodded, closing her eyes in concentration. Slowly, the glowing patterns across her skin dimmed until they were barely visible. The effort clearly cost her, beads of moisture forming on her forehead without thinking. Tessa moved closer, putting her arm around the princess's shoulders to steady her. They remained that way, huddled together in the darkness as the Imperial vessel passed within kilometers of their position, minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Finally, the patrol ship moved on, its engines flaring as it jumped to faster-than-light speed. They exhaled together, neither immediately moving away from their embrace. Novara's constellation slowly brightened again, casting a gentle glow between them. Where will we go now? She asked softly. Tessa's eyes reflected the starlight from Novara's skin. I know people who can help. A group that's been working against the coup in your system. Rebels? Novara asked, hope creeping into her voice. Freedom fighters, Tessa corrected with a small smile. And they've been waiting for something to rally behind. Something like a surviving heir to the throne, Novara finished, understanding dawning in her silver eyes. The rebellions embraced the rebel base on Demetria's moon wasn't much to look at, a collection of repurposed mining facilities half buried beneath the lunar surface, but to Tessa and Novara, after 2 weeks of cramped quarters aboard the Wayfarer, it seemed expansive. Commander Yedin, a grizzled veteran of 3 interstellar conflicts, studied Novara with barely concealed amazement. We thought all the royal family had been eliminated in the coup, he said. Your survival changes everything, Your Highness. Around the strategy table stood representatives from a dozen worlds affected by the Solarian upheaval, a Meridian tactical officer, a Vesperian communications expert, even a Draxian weapons specialist unusual, given their species' typical neutrality. The people need to know you're alive, urged Ensela, a fiery Solarian exile whose family had served the royal court for generations. Your existence alone would inspire resistance across the Empire. Novara stood tall, her royal bearing fully restored now that she was among allies. Yet Tessa noticed how the princess subtly positioned herself closer to her, their shoulders nearly touching. Announcing my survival prematurely would be a mistake, Novara countered. The usurper would simply intensify his hunt and silence any uprising before it begins. Tessa supported her position. We need a strategy that leverages the princess's return at the optimal moment, not just as a symbol, but as the culmination of a coordinated effort. The meeting continued late into the night, plans forming and dissolving as various approaches were considered. Throughout it all, Tessa remained by Novara's side, their occasional exchanged glances conveying more than words could. Later, they were shown to adjacent quarters, small but private rooms carved from the lunar rock. Standing at Novara's doorway, Tessa found herself reluctant to leave. You handled that meeting like you were born to it, she said with genuine admiration. Novara's smile was tinged with sadness. I was born to it, though I never expected to lead from exile. You won't be in exile for long, Tessa promised. The princess stepped closer, the constellations across her skin pulsing with emotion she couldn't or wouldn't verbalize. These past weeks with you have taught me more about courage than all my years in the royal court. She reached up, her fingers tracing the line of Tessa's jaw with exquisite gentleness. The touch sent a current through Tessa that had nothing to do with Solarian energy manipulation. In my culture, Novara continued, her voice barely above a whisper, we believe that souls who face danger together form bonds that transcend ordinary connections. Tessa found herself leaning into the touch. And what does your culture say about acting on those connections? That they are rare and precious, Novara replied, her silver eyes reflecting the soft lighting of the corridor, and that denying them is a tragedy greater than any political defeat. Their lips met in a kiss that seemed to ignite Novara's constellations, bathing them both in soft, pulsating light. Tessa's hands found the princess's waist, drawing her closer as the kiss deepened, carrying with it all the tension and unspoken feelings of their journey together. When they finally parted, breathless, Novara's forehead rested against Tessa's. I never expected to find something so profound in the midst of losing everything else. Neither did I, Tessa admitted, her diplomatic reserve finally dissolving completely. A discreet cough from further down the corridor interrupted the moment. Commander Yedin stood there, his expression carefully neutral. Forgive the intrusion, he said, but we've received intelligence that changes everything. The usurper is planning a coronation ceremony in 3 days' time. Once completed, even your return might not be enough to challenge his legitimacy. Tessa and Novara exchanged glances, their personal moments suspended by the weight of what lay ahead. Then we have 3 days to plan our response, Novara said, her voice once again taking on the authority of her royal heritage. But as they followed Yedin back to the strategy room, her hand found Tessa's fingers intertwining in a silent promise that what had begun between them wouldn't be forgotten. Returned to the throne, the grand hall of Solaris Prime echoed with ceremonial music as the usurper, Duke Render, approached the ancient throne. Thousands of dignitaries, nobles, and military officials filled the chamber, their faces masks of political necessity rather than genuine celebration. Quite the spectacle, Tessa whispered from their hiding place in a service corridor overlooking the proceedings. Dressed in the uniform of the palace staff, she blended perfectly with the background workers who kept the enormous ceremony running smoothly. Beside her, Novara wore similar attire, though nothing could truly disguise the subtle glow of her skin. They had dampened her constellations with a specialized compound, but under stress, flickers of light still pulsed beneath the fabric of her uniform. He's recreated the traditional ceremony almost perfectly, Novara observed, her voice tight. He's even wearing my father's ceremonial mantle. The plan was precarious but elegant. Wait until the moment before the crown was placed on Rendar's head. Then trigger the rebel forces who had infiltrated key positions throughout the palace. Simultaneously, Novara would reveal herself to the assembled dignitaries, many of whom had secretly opposed the coup but feared standing alone. Commander Yedin's team is in position, Tessa confirmed, checking her communicator. Insula has control of the broadcast systems. The moment you step forward, your image will be transmitted across the Empire. Their eyes met, and despite the gravity of the moment, Tessa couldn't help but reach out, her fingers brushing against Novara's cheek. No matter what happens next, she said softly, what we've found together has been worth every risk. Novara leaned into the touch. In the Royal Chronicles, there's a passage about destiny bringing together souls from distant stars. I never understood it until now. The ceremonial drums reached their crescendo, signaling the final phase of the coronation. It was time. Ready? Tessa asked. Novara nodded, squeezing Tessa's hand once before releasing it. Ready? They slipped through service doors and positioned themselves at the edge of the grand hall. The High Priest of Solaris stood before Duke Render, raising the ancient crown high for all to witness. By the authority vested in me, the priest intoned, I crown you, stop. Novara's voice rang out, amplified by technology Insula had secretly integrated into the hall's acoustic system. She stepped forward, removing her disguise in one fluid motion. The constellations across her skin blazed to life, no longer suppressed, creating a luminous aura that marked her unmistakably as Solarian royalty. Gasps rippled through the assembly as recognition dawned. "Princess Novara." Someone cried out. Guards moved to intercept her. But rebel operatives emerged from the crowd, creating a protective barrier. Tessa stayed close, her diplomatic weapon drawn and ready. "Duke Render seized power through treachery and murder," Novara proclaimed, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber and beyond, to millions watching the broadcast across the empire. "I stand before you as the rightful heir to the Solarian throne, and I call upon all who value justice to reject this false coronation." Rendar's face contorted with rage. "Seize her. She's an imposter." But the tide had already turned. Military officers in the crowd stepped forward, signaling their units to stand down. Nobles who had been silenced by fear found their voices, denouncing Rendar's coup in the chaos that followed. Tessa never left Novara's side, guiding her through the surging crowd toward the throne. The rebels had planned for resistance, but the overwhelming support from the assembly caught even them by surprise. Within hours, Render was in custody, the palace secure, and Novara seated upon her father's throne. Receiving oaths of loyalty from military commanders and planetary governors, Tessa stood slightly apart, watching with pride as the princess, now effectively the empress, began the process of restoring legitimate rule. Their eyes met across the crowded hall, speaking volumes without words. Later, when the immediate crisis had passed, they found a moment alone in the royal gardens, where luminescent flora mirrored the patterns on Novara's skin. "The council expects me to name a royal consort eventually," Novara said, her fingers intertwined with Tessa's. "Someone to stand beside the throne and help guide the empire through reconstruction." Tessa smiled. "I imagine they have traditional candidates in mind. Noble-born Solarians with the right connections." "They do," Novara confirmed, stepping closer. "But I've learned that tradition sometimes needs to evolve. The old empire fell because it became rigid, isolated. Perhaps what we need now is a bridge between worlds." She raised their joined hands, the glow of her constellations extending to envelop Tessa's skin in gentle light. "Are you asking what I think you're asking?" Tessa whispered. Novara's smile was radiant. "I'm asking if the human who was brave enough to stand up for me when no one else would now be brave enough to stand beside me always." Their lips met under the luminescent canopy, sealing a promise that would reshape not just their lives, but the future of an empire.